the small thing of finding the next Apple, Google, and Facebook. So,
Just tell us who they are, and be okay.
you just want the names so we can move on?
Yeah.
That's great. Unfortunately, like most things with your money, it's a little more complicated than giving you 3 hot tips and moving on. So, I've owned Apple since March 2003. I bought it in my hedge fund when the stock was at $14, $13 a share. This is before it split 2 for 1 and then later 7 for 1. So literally my cost basis on the first shares of Apple I still own are $1. And it's helped my career. I mean, you can imagine it helped me get my own TV show, frankly, because everybody thought I was a genius. And, I've done a pretty good job of faking it so far. Let's see if we can't keep going. Seriously, though, or not too seriously, though, because this is all needs to be taken with a little bit of grain of salt and have some fun because it's hard. Finding the next Apple and Google is risky. I've owned a lot of stocks that didn't do Apple, Google, and Facebook. Speaking of Google, yes, I bought Google on its IPO. 2 days before it came public, I was on CNBC with one Maria Bertaromo, and I don't know if she had a bad day that day or what, but boy, she was hard on me. And among the questions of mocking how little money I had in my hedge fund at the time, I was still growing, it was a new fund. But she also asked me what did I think about Google and it coming public the next few days, and would I buy it? And I said, no, I don't think so. I've done some homework and I'm not convinced yet. Well, I got an email from a friend that night who's truly one of the most brilliant tech people I've ever known. He's not necessarily an investor, but he knows everything that's going on in tech trends. And he says, you've used Google now for several years, Cody. What are you doing? Think about this one. Step back and look at it again. I spent the next 2 to 3 days doing a bunch of homework on it and learning more about the management, and had a couple of friends even that had some ins at Google, and I got to meet a few of the executives over there. By the time it came public, I went back on TV 2 days later and said, I just wanted to issue a mea culpa. I was wrong. I went out, and instead of buying it at $75 or $80 or wherever it was when it came public, I ended up paying $20 more. It was a good 20% pop that first day, but I'd gone out and been one of those people in the open market buying it. I've owned Google ever since. Facebook. I own Facebook. I didn't buy that one on the IPO. Better lucky than good in some cases. All of my subscribers, everybody I knew, even some of my friends who've never asked me for investment advice in my life, egos get in the way sometimes. When I ask the guy who actually might know something about it. So the guy who's a golf pro, for the first time ever, a friend of mine grew up with, calls me up and said, Facebook IPO, I need to buy it, right? No-brainer. Enough of those happen, and again, this is where it gets not scientific. This is more art than science. I was like, this is too overwhelming. Everybody I know wants Facebook. I love the company, and I think it'll be a great investment, but not on the IPO. I'm waiting. I think we'll get a chance to buy it on the crash. Well, as you know, stock came public around $35. Stock dropped to about 25, and I really started getting interested. Even more so, because when you think about it, by maximizing how much money they raised, by going public at $35 a share and allowing the stock to crash, they maximized the amount of money they raised. They got every single dime. Facebook got every dime out of Wall Street, every dime out of the retail investor, every dime out of the institutional investor. They got every dime they could have and put it on the balance sheet to run their company for the next 20, 40, 60 years. And you're talking about the difference of several $1 billion. If they had come public at, say, 20 or 25, and the stock had popped like everybody thinks a successful IPO should, they're wrong. Later Twitter came public. The stock was up 40%. And I said, that's the worst IPO I've ever seen. Facebook was the best IPO I've ever seen. Gave me the opportunity to invest in a management that had more money than they otherwise would have to grow their business. Not to mention the billions of dollars of cash flow that they're now spitting off. These are the types of things, I'm just sort of trying to give you a background a little bit, and to introduce the fact that I've had to do, in order to find Apple, Google, and Facebook, I've had to just do things exactly opposite what everybody else is telling me, what everybody else is looking at, and it's very difficult. Don't get me wrong. I've owned dozens or probably hundreds of other stocks in the 12 years, 13 years that I've owned Apple now. We're talking about 3, Facebook, Google, and Apple. It's tough to find 3 out of hundreds, much less 3 out of the 15,000 publicly traded companies out there. So I've got a few guidelines, a few rules, a few trends, technology things, revolutions that we're living through. Not just disruptions, but true revolutions. Our society, our lives are being revolutionized in the same way that Apple was set up to revolutionize our lives in 2003 as the iPod, then iPhone, then iPad, now the Apple Watch. These things are real. They are revolutionary. They are happening. We're talking about marketplaces that are going to be measured in trillion-dollar valuations. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of revenues and earnings that will be generated in the next 5 or 10 years. That's the only way you're going to find another Apple, another Facebook, another Google. You don't buy a stock and hope it gets hyped enough that it goes up 100-fold, or in Facebook's case, 4-fold, or in Google's case, 10-fold. That's not the idea. You're trying to buy companies that are going to make a lot of money, not companies whose stocks will go up. You don't care about that part. If you truly want to look out over the next 10 years, it's irrelevant how much hype, it's irrelevant what the multiple of the stock is. When Apple was trading in 2003 and I bought it, again, it was $13 a share. They had $14 net cash in the balance sheet, in the checking account. They could have taken a check and written every shareholder a check for $14. The marketplace, Wall Street, analysts, everybody on the planet is therefore making a judgment on Apple at that point, saying that they are going to destroy value. They're never going to make money, much less generate shareholder returns. They're not even worth as much money as they've got in the checking account. I mean, think about that. That'd be like you having $1 million checking account for your business, and some guy comes along and says, I'll give you $900,000 for your business and the $1 million in your checking account, and you said yes. That's what people were selling Apple to me at $1 a share. That's a rare thing for a company to have their founder, Steve Jobs, come along about the iPod and the iPhone and the iPad and then take this, now I've got 129 times gain on it. That's very rare and very lucky. If Steve Jobs had gotten sick earlier, if Steve Jobs had actually gotten arrested for stealing my money when he backdated his options along with his CFO Oppenheimer, these things were illegal back then, and I was pretty angry about it in 2005, 2006 when it came out that, I don't know if you guys remember any of this, but they were awarding themselves options, and the stock price had dropped 30, 40%, and so they went, well, we'll just lower the price of our options. We'll be able to own shares at $30 a share instead of at $45 a share. Interesting note, not many people realize this, but Steve Jobs actually ended up getting fewer shares at a lower strike price. And if he had just left it alone, his family would actually have several tens of billions of dollars more today in net worth if they just hadn't backdated their options. Crime doesn't pay. Except it did for Steve Jobs because he didn't go to jail. But the point being, that could have happened. They could have actually gone prosecuted, which they should have, and the stock would have crashed. And Steve Jobs wouldn't have come out with the iPhone 2 years later. These things, I can't help. I can't avoid. I'm going to, in every investment I've ever owned, I'm betting on the management. I'm betting on the salespeople. I'm betting on the company, the tens of thousands of people in that company. The easiest way to find the next Facebook, Apple, and Google is to invest in yourself. I personally feel like my own returns and the money I put in my suits and going to dinners and building my career, building my net worth, and building all of my life, I feel like I've had much more than 129 times return on each of those dollars that I put in my own life. And I actually get to execute. I get to control my life when I invest in myself. We're not here talking about that today, that we are actually trying to find the next Facebook, Apple, and Google, but I want to be clear. If management screws up, if Mark Zuckerberg doesn't deliver what he's delivered. If he hadn't bought WhatsApp, I didn't like the WhatsApp purchase. He gave away 10% of my company for a company that doesn't even hardly even have any revenues when he bought WhatsApp. He's got a vision with 1 billion people on WhatsApp. He's going to make a lot of revenues. When I bought Facebook, I believed in him. He didn't have much revenue, but he had 1 billion people on Facebook. I got that. I think you can do the same thing with WhatsApp. You have to bet on the management. You have to bet on the visionaries. You have to bet on the people that are running that company. I personally take investments in some of my private companies. I've got a startup, Scudify. And we also own the Future app. I've got a company messaging app called Future. You guys can actually send messages using Future app, and you schedule when the recipient gets it, so that it's not just instant. You can send it instant, but if you want to remind someone tomorrow of something, you want to remind your father to take his pills every night at 9, you can have a video show up every night at 9, beep on his phone. Soon that'll be on the Apple Watch too, every night at 9 o'clock. You can also send something 30 years into the future. The reason I bring this up is because people who invest in my companies, they're betting on me. They're betting on my ability to have a vision, to create value, to build a company, to create revenues, earnings. And frankly, I feel a lot of pressure about it. This is a startup. We're an app company. We're more like WhatsApp than Facebook right now. I hope Facebook comes along and helps us figure out how to monetize it. I hope the management there, someone I would want to bet with, and sell my company to. The point being that you're betting on people. When you invest in any company, you're not investing in a stock, you're investing in the people running the company, the sales guys selling the products, the accountants who are managing the books. Again, Oppenheimer, the CFO at Apple, completely lied and cheated millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars from me in 2005. It's backdating of options. It's almost enough to make me sell the stock, but I saw the iPhone about to come out, so I stuck with it, and I was actually surprised that there was not more consternation and prosecution of that crime. But let's look at Google. You bet on Google. You got a business plan. Search results, advertising around the web. People on blogs get an ad for thestreet.com, for Scudify, for Twitter. Google is probably placing those ads on that internet. That was great from 2004, 2005, frankly, from the late 90s when the company was founded, through the first 5 or 10 years of its existence. It did much, it provided so much more value to that person searching than anyone else, than any other company could. The growth was astounding. The trend was clear. Well, we're in 2015 and search is dead. I mean, what time, search the web for Abraham Lincoln. That's how you search today. Siri's going to give me that answer, and Google doesn't have an ad on there. Why would I still own Google today?
Wearables.
Say that again?
Wearables.
Wearables. And management. The management was smart enough in 2007 to go out and acquire Android for tens of millions of dollars. Android would probably on its own be worth $100 billion today. The market cap of Google, it's 250, 300 billion right now. So a third of that comes from Android alone, which didn't even exist in 2007, 2006 as part of Google. So you've got to bet that management knows what they're doing. And you got to track and make sure when they buy a company like Android, it's making sense. But the thing with Google and Android is, we're talking about a vision. They knew that they needed to be in the mobile space. They knew they needed an operating system to become a dominant player in mobile. Search isn't as important in mobile. Apps are more important in mobile. So you've got to build a platform that can enable those apps. Google was, 2004, 2005 is when they started doing this, looking into the Android concept and creating a mobile concept, operating system. At the same time, by the way, Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, was on the board of Apple. And if you've read the book, you know that Steve Jobs was, to his deathbed, pretty angry, and rightly so, at Eric Schmidt for stealing the concept of a smartphone platform that had apps running on it and making it open source, which is what they did, which is what Google did with Android. Meanwhile, Apple had this entire other model of, as you know, selling the iPhone and making an operating system inside of the hardware. Now, again, what the heck was Steve Jobs thinking putting Eric Schmidt on the board? I mean, Steve Jobs, everybody reveres him, but the guy was stealing money from me and putting Eric Schmidt on my board. So, let's take it all with a grain of salt there too. People mess up. Steve Jobs was a genius, but he made a lot of mistakes. Yeah, he had to bet in the bigger picture, though. Sergey Brin, who's the other founder of Google? I'm joking, I'm up here in front of you.
Larry Page.
Larry and Sergey, clearly, these guys are visionaries. When they left and Eric Schmidt took over, I was less enamored with Eric Schmidt. I loved his book, by the way, if you haven't read it, The Google Way or whatever, it just came out a couple months ago. Very interesting. Gained more respect for his vision after reading his book. But I don't think Eric Schmidt is a visionary like Sergey and Larry and Steve or Mark Zuckerberg. So finally, let me just get to the Mark Zuckerberg, the same sort of thing, guys. When I'm betting on Mark, I have to bet that his WhatsApp vision, giving 10% of my company to WhatsApp, is value, is something. If you don't believe in Mark Zuckerberg and the ability to monetize billions of users on several different apps, you don't own Facebook. You don't own anything. If you don't believe in the CEO of Citigroup, if you don't believe in Jamie Dimon at Chase, JP Morgan, which I do not believe in Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan. I think he does a great job lobbying and begging for welfare money to keep his companies and his shareholders in the green, keep them afloat. The company would have been bankrupt and insolvent in 2008 if you hadn't bailed them out with welfare money. But I'll never own that Chase. I have no interest in betting with Jamie Dimon. I'm not buying JP Morgan stock. I would be buying the company that Jamie Dimon and his minions and his people are running. You were going to ask a quick question. I certainly don't mind taking one in the middle here to make sure we're on the right track.
What do you think of Elon Musk?
I think he's a lot more in the Jamie Dimon side of welfare begging public funding for his companies versus the Steve Jobs, Larry Page trying to create value in real companies. And don't get me wrong, Apple doesn't pay its fair share of taxes, shoots all those revenues over to Ireland before they bring it back over here. If they actually paid a fair tax rate, earnings would be 10 to 20% lower. And they would have been 10 to 20% lower every year for the last 10 years. That's a mission of mine. I think every corporation needs to pay just as much tax as my corporations do. So, that being said, I don't see Steve Jobs out there begging the Republican Democrat regime, your government, to build his factories, which is what Elon Musk does. If Elon Musk's business model was so great, I don't know why he would be needing welfare money to build his taxes to keep his shares going through the roof. I think he does a great job lobbying and begging for welfare money for his shareholders in the same way Jamie Dimon does, but I would never buy a company that depends on government to build its factories. So he's a visionary without a doubt, but I think he's a visionary that needs my he needs my forced help. If he were asking for me to invest in privately and thought he could fund his company that way, I'd be a lot more interested. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any other questions I can answer right quick before I sort of segue into actually some other companies we should be looking at these days? All right, let's talk some trends. I wrote an article recently for you guys, by the way. You can find me at tradingwithcody.com. I publish all of my trades in real time before I buy or sell any stock or option. I publish all of my positions, list them in order from largest to smallest, and give them all a rating of 1 to 10. There's never been a 10 rating because nothing's perfect. Except maybe investing in yourself, that would be as close to a 10 opportunity as I can think of. But investing in someone else will never be perfect, always risk. Anyway, you can find all this stuff at Trading with Cody, and I write 5 or 6 articles and reports every week, and I publish a lot of stuff on Trading with Cody. At any rate, I'm also published at USA Today and the Financial Times, and you name it, I distribute my content to it. Recently wrote an article there for the USA Today talking about the 5 most revolutionary growth trends in America today, in the world today. Let's face it, America is sort of irrelevant in the grand scheme of the economic potential that you have when you buy Google. Apple, Google, Facebook are not driven by American consumers. They're not driven by Americans. These are global companies. But sales outside of America that are bigger than they are here. Number one, drones. Drones are going to get smaller. They're going to get much more functional, much cooler. They're going to stream constantly, video, any place you want to see. You'll have drones in the sky, giving wireless broadband to Africans, people in undeveloped places. Not developing, we're talking truly undeveloped. You don't even have to have anything but a shack and electricity, and you're going to be able to get on broadband using drones in the sky. Facebook's going to do that. Google's going to do that using drones and balloons. You're going to be able to have internet access globally, wherever you are, just about, unless you're in the bottom of a basement at the casino and they're blocking your phone. None of you went to the casino yet? You're still in the I'm going to invest learning part. You can get later tonight, I know. I'll see you guys down at the blackjack tables, hitting the slots. Which is no way to actually spend your money, by the way. If you're going to gamble, play cards. Number two, robotics. Robotics and drones are somewhat similar. Drones and robotics, frankly, also encompass driverless cars. And everybody knows, again, Google is going to be a major player in the driverless car world. Well, you're betting on management being able to pull that vision off. That's a very risky proposition for most companies. Talking billions of dollars being invested to make that business maybe work. Well, I want to believe the management knows what they're doing. If they're spending my shareholder money on that idea, sure better work. I do believe driverless cars are going to be huge. They will be so revolutionary. We're talking 90% of all commuter traffic will be on driverless cars within 10, maybe 20 years. Let's look out 2-3 decades. Certainly by the, say, 2050s, driving will be a luxury that people do only as a hobby. It will never be something you do out of necessity. 30 years. Driverless cars have had 0 accidents that they've caused so far from Google. People caused them. They've been in wrecks, but all 11 of them were legally determined to be caused by human error, not. Say that again?
I said it has to be pointed out.
It has to be pointed out. And even so, we're talking 1.7 million miles with 11 wrecks.
Yep.
I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I can drive 1.7 million miles without a wreck. I just slammed the back of my Toyota Tundra work truck into a work post the other day because there was too much ice. I live in the mountains. Robotics, drones, driverless cars, these things are going to be everywhere. The ability for sensors to read everything that's going on and stream to someone who's actually thinking person that whatever's going on, and then to be able for that person to control the device that's streaming that, those things are huge. The revolutionary in their magnitude and how they will change how you guys would come to the money show. I mean, I'll come back to this right here with wearables. This is really where it all comes together. The Wearables Revolution is one that if you want to find the next Facebook, Google, and Apple, that's the one you've got to get in front of. Wearables are going to be $1 trillion market within 5 years. We're talking about, right now, maybe 1 billion smartphones are sold every year.
How many?
Well, 1 billion. 1 billion smartphones. 1 out of every 7 people every year could buy a smartphone, and that's where you get that number. But obviously people lose them, break them, buy them as a present for someone else. The vast majority, there are more than 1 billion calling devices. There's old phones, 200 or 300 million every year sold, but that's obviously getting to be a smaller and smaller percentage. You're talking about 1 billion smartphones sold every year already in 2015. I've now got one wearable device that's tied into my smartphone. In another 2 years, I will have my GoPro, or probably an Apple or Google or someone else will actually beat GoPro to it, but I'm going to have a little lapel camera that I'm going to be able to wear And we're not going to need these things up here. You guys are going to be holding up your smartphone if you have to. More to the point, you might just have a camera right here on your side of your glasses, and we're going to be able to stream this to everybody. And I'm going to give you a name right now, Twitter. Buy Twitter. If you want to invest in wearables, you buy Twitter. Twitter is the single best play on the Wearables Revolution right now. And it's not because of Twitter. It's because they bought Periscope.
Who we buying?
Periscope. It's an app company. Periscope, like, like from a U-boat lookout. And it's a great name, by the way, frankly, for this concept. What Periscope does is you can follow me on Periscope. I just signed up yesterday, frankly. I've been following some people for a while, but I went ahead and signed up. And you can follow me, and if I open up my Periscope app, it pulls up the video camera. And everything that I show is now streaming over the broadband, and you can see it on your phone, what's happening. So bring that home here. You guys don't need these cameras. You don't even need to be here. Just need one guy who has the Periscope app and some streaming wearable devices to watch this event, and then you can stream it to yourself and never even have to travel to the money show.
Is that going to put that kind of Canon out of business?
Is that going to put Canon out of business? Is Canon still in business? What did you say?
Seizures, do they know about this? So they're planning what to do with their conference?
No, but I mean, I guarantee there will have, when I brought this up actually about a year ago at the Money Show, and I was talking about the Wearables Revolution, and Twitter didn't have Periscope, we're further along it than we were at the time. But when I brought this up and how you're not going to be able to avoid being streamed, you're going to be on a subway, and the guy sitting across from you is going to be streaming it from his lapel live and never bother turning it off. And someone in the crowd said, well, doesn't that create a great business opportunity for someone to create wearable shirts that disrupt the ability to film you?
Yeah.
And you can't see me. Your camera gets fuzzy when it looks over at my shirt. That's the future too. They're going to have with anything, you got to find the flip it. You got to find the opposite side of it, and there's going to be a growth industry too. So just like security, because of spam, well, you can also find companies that actually do spam, and there's been a lot of money made in the last 10 years. What were you about to ask?
Yeah, what are your thoughts about GoPro?
So GoPro's a hardware company, and unless you're Apple, I'm probably not going to buy you if you're a hardware company. GoPro doesn't have an operating system. They do, but I guess sort of. The GoPro itself I've got 2 or 3 GoPros at home. I've used them for years, a year at least, and I find it cumbersome. It's much too hard. I think GoPro's in trouble, frankly, long term. I think maybe this year they'll still be in a sweet spot, but I think you look out 3 to 5 years in Chinese knockoff competition, wearables from Apple, Google Android-based wearable cameras. I think that's going to be so much easier to use than a GoPro device. GoPro is trying to pivot, that's their term, to becoming a content company. And one of the things I am going to talk about today is content is still king. You want to own companies that create content because distribution of that content is now free. You stream it on your phone, you stream it on your computer, you stream it on your TV. Content is king. GoPro should have, and I talked about this when GoPro came public. They needed a Periscope app. Where was GoPro not buying Periscope or Meerkat and rolling out Meerkat is a company it's an app company like Periscope that does the exact same thing, enables people to stream what's in front of their camera and you can watch it live. That was the opportunity. If GoPro had owned that, I think it would have been a great opportunity. I'd be up here talking about GoPro instead of Twitter. I like Twitter anyway. I think Twitter's business model and the 140 characters that they create so much data and so much real-time feedback out of in this planet. I think there's a future there anyway. I think it's undervalued anyway. But with the wearables and the Periscope coming down the pike in 5 to 10 years, Twitter is going to be the first name I talk about here today. Yes?
I hear so much so many of the forecasters are maligning Twitter. I happened to buy it on the dip when the sales didn't come in good.
And there you go. Again, let me be clear. I make a lot of mistakes. I'm an idiot. I'm going to say things today that we'll look back in 5 years and be like, what the hell was that guy talking about? He had no clue. Hopefully I'm right about a lot of it. That's why you're here. You're betting your time on this guy right now, if you're not actually betting your money on it. But that is actually a great point. I want to repeat. You got to do what everybody else isn't doing. If you want to find the next Apple, maybe it is GoPro. I'm up here saying it's not. I don't know anybody that I truly respect as a technologist who thinks GoPro has a future. Well, therein might be your opportunity. Maybe that means that stock is tremendously undervalued. And if you actually believe in the management, I think he's just sort of a goofy surfer dude. So I'm not going to bet on GoPro's management anyway. But I love the fact that you're saying, yes, everybody you know is maligning GoPro, therefore you went out and bought it.
Twitter.
I thought you said GoPro.
No.
Oh, well, heck yeah, that's exactly GoPro. Forget it then. Yes, Twitter. Buy Twitter right now. Everybody hates it.
One reason I bought it was on CNN, I can't remember the website that I look at. Money CNN. Anyway, they said 75% CAGR. I mean, if that's
Compound annual growth, 75%. It'll be 100% if I had to guess by the time those numbers all come in year over year. Granted, there's no earnings, but you get to earnings when you do 100% compound annual growth rate for a few years. That's how you get there. Yes, I don't think it. I think Twitter is more hated right now than GoPro, and GoPro is definitely a hated stock. Facebook is loved. It's not hated right now. It's near its all-time highs. Google, I think, is sort of hated right now. I think Google's another good buying opportunity. It's down from about, I think, 750 or 800 was its highs, and it's now back at 530. I own Google still, and I actively bought some just a couple of months ago when it dropped below 500. I snuck in and bought a few shares, and if it gets below 500 again, I'll probably sneak in and do another little nibble. She had a question.
Netflix, you like content. Do you like it at this valuation?
Missed it. We missed it. I know. We missed it.
You have no idea how many times the last, I don't know, starting in 2008 on my show, I used to talk about Netflix being a great content is king, great way, this is the app revolution, you gotta own Netflix. I got done with my show and I started buying stocks again, and Netflix had already gone from like 50 to 150. I'm going to wait, maybe I'll get a better opportunity. Went up to 300, dropped down to 90 after they did that disastrous splitting off of you could either get DVDs delivered or stream or whatever it was, and everybody got really upset. And the stock crashed, and I looked at it, I worked on it, I wanted to buy it, I believe, I've met the man, what's the CEO, he was on my show 2 or 3 times, I've had a drink with him, I love the guy, there's no reason. Reed Hastings. And I never pulled the trigger. I didn't want to talk about that today. Did you notice it didn't say how to find the next Facebook, Google, and Netflix? No, it was Facebook, Google, and Apple, because I thought those are, in all seriousness, I love Netflix. I love Reed Hastings. I think they are brilliant. I think they're truly the purest app play on the video revolution that you ever could have dreamt of. And I still don't own it, and I still watch it go up 3% every week, and just, I've actually, one of these days soon, I'm going to have to remove it from my screen for a while, because it's just costing me too much consternation. Yes?
Well, a good question for you. You're talking about Twitter, you're talking about Google, and Twitter's taking a big hit. Don't they have an underlying bottom of the floor where the stock could go because Google could buy them out? I mean, it's like
I don't think so. I don't think Google could buy anybody right now. I think Google's in so much trouble with the EU and the regulators and the antitrust. And for the record, I don't know if we're going to have antitrust laws in this country. Let's enforce them. I don't personally believe we should have antitrust laws. I believe in creative disruption. But we have laws on the books, and I'm sick to death of Kraft being merged with Heinz and all of this nonsense. And I think it's great that someone's actually looking over Google's shoulder and going, you can't just roll up every Yelp and Twitter and possible competition and roll it into your own. And so no, I don't think Google could buy anybody right now. That being said, and no, I don't know that there's a floor in Twitter. I don't know. I personally think at $25 billion market cap where it is today, it's about 1/10 the value of Facebook I don't think it'll be 1/10 the Facebook value in 5 years. I think Facebook will probably double in the next 5 years, and I think Twitter could go up 5 times, maybe 10 times. $150, $200 billion market cap on Twitter wouldn't shock me. So, that'd be a 7 to 10 times return. But there's no floor. There are no earnings. There's a couple $1 billion on the balance sheet. So maybe, looking at the Apple history I did, if I were going to get the opportunity to buy Twitter at the same cost basis versus its cash balance that I did on Apple that I mentioned earlier, Twitter would be at $1.50, $2. They got about $2, $3 per share net cash. That's where that stock would end up having a floor. In the meantime, yeah, I mean, I think it could drop into the teens.
Do you see anybody possible acquisition? Not really, not right now.
I don't know that anybody could buy Twitter. I don't know that anybody needs, I don't want Twitter to sell out. I think it can become a huge media conglomerate company on its own right. As a shareholder, just let me hold it for the next 5 years. I think it'll work out. And Facebook's not going to be able to buy them either. So, any other questions? I'm happy to keep answering. Do you guys like the pace here? Am I doing all right?
Yeah.
All right. Nobody's sleeping except that guy. No, I'm just kidding. Yes.
Yeah, underlying all three of these are things like bandwidth, hardware, microprocessors. Those guys are playing now, but they're not visible names. Is that something you kind of avoid? You just
No, not necessarily. As my friend here in the back row could tell you, the last time I talked about the Wearables Revolution at a money show, the stock I talked about was Ambarella, AMBA. They make the chipsets that enable GoPro cameras to record. And the stock's gone from 20 to 75 in the last year. And I would love to buy it back. I mean, I still own it, but I'd love to buy more if it dropped to 50 or something, but I'm not chasing it right now. That thing's pretty fully valued. I'm not afraid to buy derivative plays if I think. Another one I do own right now and I like is Synaptics, SYNA. They make a lot of these interfaces that you use on your phone right now in order to tap and scroll and things. What do you think wearables are going to do? They are going to need an interface. Synaptics, I think, is another great play on the Wearables Revolution. Ambarella is a great play because everybody's recording video with their devices, and Ambarella is the de facto standard for doing that. So I'm not afraid to buy the underlying broadband providers or the chipset providers or the components or anything, as long as I think the business model makes sense, as long as I think there's a huge growth trajectory and revolution happening in that sector, and as long as I like management. So yeah, Synaptics and Ambarella, all of those cases are true, so I own both of them. You hint on something, though, that we live in an incredible time, that these tectonic plates have shifted beneath us to the point, let me finish this statement and I'll get you, that these tectonic plates have shifted to the point where we are living through revolutions. We are seeing smartphones go from 0 to 1 billion devices sold in 8 years. 8 years. $500 to $1,000 a pop is what those smartphones actually cost. And you're subsidized when you buy your subscriber plan with Verizon or AT&T. But you're talking 500 times $1 billion, $500 billion from 0 to $500 billion in 8 years. That's what the smartphone revolution did. The app revolution, as I've called it all along, because it's not truly about the smartphone or the tablet, it's much bigger than that. It's those apps running on it. And that is where wearables are going in the next 5 to 10 years. You're going from $10 billion, maybe $50 billion in wearable device sales this year to $500 billion of wearable device sales and apps and purchases and the things that go in underneath it all that is going to be driven over the next 5 to 10 years. And yeah, actually, speaking of which, the $500 cost is this retail cost. That's the end user cost for those billion smartphones. Intel has to sell pieces into it. Micron has to sell pieces into it. They need to recognize, $1, $2, not necessarily Intel, but Synaptics gets $1.50 out of every iPhone ever sold. So 60 million iPhones sold last quarter, $1.50 a pop. Synaptics has got a $90 million baseline run rate on that kind of map. What was that? There was a question, yes.
So what do you think about materials like graphene, ceramics, different displays?
What was the first material?
Graphene?
Graphene. I would love to see a material revolution happen. I think that's what you might be getting at, right? The different, lighter, stronger materials, and yes, absolutely. I think I'm not going to see some of the stuff coming down the pike. I'm, like anybody else, myopic in some ways, in my view of where this trend of wearables and broadband and this whole tectonic plate shifting going on that we're talking about. I love that. It's not on my radar. Why wouldn't there be truly some material revolutions that are happening down the next 5, 10, 20 years that change the way we carry devices, ship containers? And along with that, I do think one of the things we all need to be on the lookout for, it's not here yet, but it probably will be in the next 5 years, battery revolution, the energy revolution. I'm not interested in buying oil wells or other, again, subsidized welfare energy companies, but I truly believe there are a lot of really smart guys sitting in their garages and or better funded places than that. They're trying to figure out how to get you wireless electricity everywhere all the time. And Tesla was trying to do that 120 years ago or whatever it was. And I truly think we're going to get to see it before I die. Yes?
Something like Skyworks Solution.
Like Synaptics. I mean, I've owned Skyworks in the past. It's not been... I lost faith in management at some point. I had a couple of bad quarters and I sold it for a loss. Like I said, I'm an idiot. I lose money too. So, but yeah, Skyworks, I wish I'd owned it for the last 10 years too, because it's a great way of playing the revolutionary trends in front of it.
IBM's Watson is kind of a disruptive thing. That could be actually ported to a different domain. Maybe it's medical first.
IBM,
go to something else.
IBM's cheap. I look at IBM, I've been short IBM for a couple of years, from 2010, 2013 maybe, I finally covered about a year ago. And the reason I covered is just because the stock got so darn cheap. It just kept growing earnings, even if it's somewhat artificially manipulated on the balance sheet, they're growing. And stock's getting cheaper as it stagnates or drops. Technology, I don't believe, since Lou Gerstner left, I haven't thought there's been anybody, I can't even tell you who runs IBM right now. I've looked it up 5 times.
Virginia or Mimi?
It's a robot. I don't know what she's doing. I'm bored to death with IBM, and it has nothing to do with who's running it, except for the fact I don't like the person running it. I don't think they're a visionary. So no, IBM's Watson will probably end up in a dustbin in 5 years if I had to guess, unless someone else comes in there and figures out. Maybe Google can buy IBM, and I'd be interested finally. But otherwise, when I was on the Tonight Show, first time, I guess 2008 or so, we were talking about the car companies being bailed out. It was when TARP was going on, the banks were being bailed out and everything. And one of the things I actually proposed there on the Tonight Show with Jay, and everybody thought I was nuts, and they probably still do, was let Ford and GM and Chrysler go bankrupt. I couldn't care less. Let Google buy some of those assets out of bankruptcy. Google's going to get into driverless cars someday. That was 2008. Just guessing at the time. But yes, I do think there's car revolution, transportation revolution, materials revolution, electronic battery revolution, energy revolution. This stuff is all here in front of you, and that is one of the things I do want to drill home for you guys today. Is you personally have expertise that I never will. You personally are able to see the world in ways that I can't. You have an edge that nobody else here can. And whether you're in banking, or whether you live in foreign country, or whether you're a woman or a young guy or an old guy, or you have a perspective on things that you're going to be able to see the world in revolutions that are coming down the pike that no one else can. So if you work in the energy sector, learn it. Get an edge. Invest in energy. I wouldn't put all my eggs in the same sector as one that I work in, but yes, you have an edge. The best way for you personally to find the next Facebook, Google, and Apple is investing in yourself. Secondary to that, would be finding a company and a trend and a revolution in the sector that you're an expert in. Even whatever the case may be, materials. I mean, who would think the guys who do steel are sitting there looking for a revolution? But what's my Ayn Rand Steel, what was the guy, starts with an R? Reardon Still. Reardon Still. Maybe we'll see Reardon Still in our lifetime. Good reference, by the way. Thanks. Yes.
What do you think of Uber?
I love Uber. I live in rural New Mexico these days, and Uber does not have a presence in Ruidoso, New Mexico, nor do I think it will anytime soon. But that's the app revolution. That's the smartphone. That's the watch app revolution happening in front of you. And that is one of the companies that found, again, that's a classic example. If you're a cab driver, you better figure out who the best revolutionary plays in cab driving and in that industry are. And Uber has clearly taken an industry that had some sort of pent up, screwed up, weird way of operating that was totally inefficient and totally screws the consumer and disrupted it and makes it reasonable, easy to use, and cheaper. Well, there's a great investment. I will have to wait until I see Uber come public because I have no idea whether it'll be at $100 billion valuation or if it's over $100 billion, I'm worried a lot of that upside's already played out. I don't know that Uber could be a $1 trillion company or something, but I mean, maybe Uber actually ends up being the ones that deliver driverless cars too. And you've got a whole revolution for them to ride with no costs at that point except for literally gas.
Cody, you're talking about management and how smart. Jeff Bezos from Amazon, wealthy, powerful people, smart,
Yes.
brilliant. Thoughts about Amazon?
I've owned Amazon, and I'm not going to cry because I made good money on it over the years, but I did. Sometimes you look at your own life and the decisions you made, like selling Amazon, and you're just like, what? I can't for the life of me remember what made me sell that thing. I've been talking about the 4 horsemen of tech, the new 4 horsemen of tech for 10 years. And it was Amazon, Apple, Google, and soon to be Facebook. Well, all that played out, and then at some point, Amazon was struggling for 2 or 3 quarters in a row, and I'm getting a little concerned about the markets or something. I'm in a bad mood. I don't know what the heck happened, but yes, I sold my Amazon around, I don't know, $350 or something. I missed the last $100, let's put it that way. I'm not happy about it, but Jeff Bezos is someone I would gladly bet on. He's a visionary. He's created. Do you remember when Amazon was a bookstore in 1998? I remember being in Manhattan and seeing a truck pull this big old sign that just said Amazon.com books. And I was like, that's an interesting way of marketing. I didn't buy the stock back then either, but eventually bought it, I think, in 2005, like 110. Got a triple out of it, but missed the last $100. Yes?
Do you think that Amazon becomes more of the cloud company retail now that they disclose how much money they do?
Yes, that last quarter when they finally broke out, Amazon, you probably guys, most of the average consumer thinks of Amazon as a retail shipper and maybe a streaming company for some content. Well, they're a huge cloud provider. A lot of my own companies use some of their cloud services and their back-end servers and these things to make our apps run. I think we actually might be on Google servers with Future, but I bet at some point it touches the Amazon cloud anyway. And that's another great example why you got to bet on management. You didn't even realize that Jeff Bezos is in there building several tens of billions of dollars business in cloud services because you were watching him build Amazon.com and the Fire tablets and these things. The guy's a genius. The company's well funded.
Why can't he make any money?
When he wants.
You can, what do you want?
Yeah.
He wants. When he wants. That thing, the revenue scale that they've gotten to already, at some point, if he decides, and as a shareholder, I was in no rush. I mean, build that thing up to the point where it's truly the de facto standard for everything I ever want to shop for. I go to Amazon. Amazon has already got an app right here. I mean, talk about a visionary. You can shop Amazon right now on your Apple Watch. Makes it even easier. You can buy your groceries on Amazon. That's, the guy at some point will go, all right, let's stop investing. Let's stop growing 20%. Let's just worry about cash flow. And you're going to see $1 billion cash flow per quarter. You'll see $2 billion cash flow per quarter there the next year. That company will start kicking off $100 billion in cash flow in 5 years, if I had to guess. So, yes?
Speaking of Amazon, what stocks do you like for drones?
For drones, I didn't get to my stock picks yet. I was still talking about the trends themselves. So, all right. You can actually, like I said, come to tradingwithcody.com. I'm going to pull up my latest positions for you and the ratings they've got. I think I might have 1 or 2 stocks I've added since I published this, but there might be 1 or 2 missing. You're not paying me that much for today's conference. Let's see if I can actually remember which ones I've added or taken off. This is in order from largest to smallest. So without a doubt, my biggest position, like I mentioned earlier, is my own career. I bet every year more money on my own career and my own companies than I'll ever bet in the stock market in my life. That's a 9+ investment. Never be a 10 because I'm not perfect. Real estate.
Move that over to the rental.
I probably can.
No, they can't bring on. There you
Can't see it.
So, Apple is my biggest position aside from, real estate. So when I left New York, I quit my TV show in 2010. I'd lived in New York for 18 years and I guess 16 years. And I had never bought a piece of real estate in my life. I had rented. From $400 rat-infested, cockroach-infested apartment in Brooklyn when I first got there to, $5,500 a month Soho artist loft by the time I left. And ups and downs in between, trust me. But I never bought anything. Had girlfriends who bought houses and I lived with for a while, and I had friends who bought houses and still own them. And I had 2 reasons for never buying real estate. Number 1, I most of the time just didn't have the money to put down a real down payment. I didn't want to take up. Number 2, I didn't want to take on hundreds of thousands or more likely millions of dollars of debt on a risky asset like real estate. Everybody's like, well, if you live in it, it's not that risky. Yes, it is. It could still crash. You could still have a house fire. You could, like in your insurance company, could get mad at you. Your taxes go up. Your real estate values drop 50%. I mean, this stuff happens. I never wanted to buy real estate until I was ready. Well, I finally moved home to New Mexico and I bought a lot of land and built a barn, converted a barn into a house, and I now own from my own ratings, real estate's probably my biggest asset right now because I own a lot of land in New Mexico. The physical gold and bullion coins, I bet that's probably about a 3 or 5% position for me total. I've got some gold coins, some gold bullion and whatnot buried at my house on my land that you guys would never be able to find if you know where I live.
But my drone is over your house right now.
Good luck with that, dude. That's actually so true. You know, that satellite imagery knows where my gold's buried. And, obviously I keep some at a bank too, but I don't trust the banks entirely. Did you hear me badmouth Jamie Dimon earlier? Do it again if you'd like, but point being, I don't trust banks if they don't pay off when there's no money in the vaults. So I'd rather just keep my own. If you're betting on gold, if you're using gold as an investment, I would caution you against putting very much of it into your portfolio. I certainly think anything more than say 15 or 20% would be outrageous for you to put your money into. Again, very risky asset. They can drop to $300 an ounce for no good reason if the government, Republican, Democrat regime manipulates it right. You can't stop that. I do think at some point in the next 20 to 30 years, just like there has been in the last 5 to 10 years, you'll see gold reset 5 to 10 times higher than its current price. I think you'll see a $5,000 to $10,000 an ounce price in my lifetime. But In the meantime, it could drop to $500 an ounce, and I don't want to have a bunch of my net worth tied up in that asset.